we have to talk about The Living Dead, which came out here August 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Please give us just this is a dream gig. You
Yeah.
get you're writing the final story in George Romero's long epic tale of zombies, and I had read or heard, I don't remember which, that you had the Night of the Living Dead was your favorite movie at age 6. Is that right?
Well, I don't know if I would have said that at age 6, but it certainly is the first movie that I actually remember seeing. I'm sure I saw some Disney movies before that, but I don't remember them. But I remember being 5 or 6 and watching Night of the Living Dead, and I saw it continually growing up. It was famously, if you're a George Romero fan, you know that it wasn't copywritten correctly, so it was public domain. So anyone could show it at any time in any theater on any channel, and therefore it was constantly on, and I saw it a million times. My mom was a fan of it, so I got introduced to it very young. And although, of course, I liked Star Wars growing up, I do like to say that George Romero movies were my Star Wars. Like, I grew up on them, and they were that important to me. They shaped my worldview. They shaped the kind of artist I would become, certainly, but more immediately the kind of person that I was becoming and would become. So to many decades later to be able to be a part of the concluding chapter of his 6 zombie movies, and Romero with Night of the Living Dead more or less invented the modern concept of the zombie. To be a part of ending that is, beyond a dream come true.
How do you get yourself in a position to be that guy?
Well, every other opportunity in life, you work hard, and then it's the right person at the right time. It was a situation where I had done a couple high-profile collaborations, so I had proven myself as somebody who could work as a collaborator with another author, and also was known to the Romero estate as somebody who was a huge George Romero fanatic, and not just of his zombie movies, but all of his movies, and was just a real student of his and a devotee of his work. And you just put that all together, and I was at least one of the people who seemed logical to approach.
That, to me, I would think that reality must be a simulation. I mean, how could any course of events get you there? That's amazing.
It is, and it's the one thing out of all my projects that I still can't, after 3 years of working on it, I still can't fully wrap my brain around it. Like I'm looking at the books right now on my shelf, and I don't get it. I don't get it how I worked with, how there's a book with George in my name both on it. I still don't fully understand how it happened.
And one thing I wonder, you must have incredible courage, as proven by your fearless Teddy saga. But here, especially because if you're working from a manuscript that Romero had written but not quite finished.
Yeah.
So if you nail it and everybody says yes, that is the perfect ending, then Romero gets all the credit because he's obviously. And then
right.
if fans are upset, it must have been this Daniel Kraus guy.
Yep. Oh yeah. That's I mean, before I started working on it, that's exactly what I said. I said, if I pull this off, George gets the credit, and I'm fine with that. If I fail, I get all the blame. But I was okay with that. I am but a humble shepherd in this case, who's really trying to bring Romero's novel, and he didn't write other novels. This was it. To bring that novel over the finish line, and do something for him, because he had done so much for me. So the way I always looked at it was not as what can I get out of this. It was always how can I give back to George? How can I execute this in a way that is the most loyal and respectful to all that he did while still taking risks, because he also took risks. And he was someone whose films could be divisive. And so I also had to be aware of that. It's like, don't be afraid, while you're being respectful, don't let that stop you from taking risks and being divisive, and carrying on in the spirit of George Romero.
So when you're doing that, obviously your name's on the cover. The book's not done. When you get your hands on it, you're going to have to add at least some portion of yourself into the story. Did you feel some freedom to take some small departures and find this is my little Daniel Kraus corner, my cozy spot that I'm gonna put my stuff in?
Well, yeah, I had to. One thing that made that slightly less of a concern is that George hadn't. It's not like George wrote half the book and stopped. It was much more complicated than that. He wrote stuff that belonged in the first portion of the book, the middle of the book, and he wrote stuff that belonged at the end of the book. So there's George all throughout this book. It's not like I could, he wrote the first half, and then I was just going on a crazy Kraus rampage to do whatever the hell I wanted for the rest.
Teddy Zombie crossover, why not?
Yeah. So I did have these sort of points that I had to hit. I had to get from this portion of George's manuscript to that portion and then the next portion. And some of those gaps were small and some of those gaps were massive. And I had to use, I did use everything that I knew about George from research and interviewing his wife and listening to his commentary tracks and reading numerous articles. And I did all my research to try to be as true to his themes and his interests and his loves and hates. But yeah, you're right. Ultimately, there was going to have to be a fair element of myself in there too. Thankfully, I truly grew up on his work, so George Romero is already part of my DNA. So it's not like we were disparate planets trying to combine. We've always been, I was almost born of George Romero, so we were already fairly close in a lot of our viewpoints.
Oh, so he's been unknowingly collaborating with you. Yeah. Just a little bit. There.
Well, yeah. I mean, all my books in some ways are probably minor collaborations with George Romero because he was so inspiring to me.
How we're running out of time, but I got to ask this question: how does that collaboration, where he's not there to say, "No, Daniel, don't do that," how does that differ with, say, working with Guillermo del Toro on Trollhunters or Shape of Water?
It's different, and my challenge was to try to make it not as different. The whole point of collaborating is that you have two voices that have to combine and push up against each other. Chances are a successful collaboration is going to have two people who agree on a lot of main tenets, but a successful collaboration is also going to have a little bit of tension. The idea being, or at least my philosophy being, that another person is going to throw you roadblocks, and that's what you want. You want someone to say, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to do this," and then you're right. Okay, we're going to do that, but then we're also going to do this thing of mine, and you're going to be forced to be more creative because you have to figure out a way to make it all work together. It's akin to low budget filmmaking, where the fact that you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of locations, et cetera, it forces you to be more creative, which is why I always tend to like filmmakers' early films better, where they have so few resources and they're really scrapping to do something creative. That's what collaboration should feel like. So I didn't have that with George, so I had to give myself those obstacles. Now, granted, because of the patchy way in which his manuscript existed, I sort of had some of that because I did have to get from point A to point B to point C that he had already put in place. So I couldn't just totally go freewheeling off into the horizon. But part of what my months of research were were focused on understanding George to an extent that I would have to know what he would do in a certain situation and deal with that, and remember when there's a fork in the road, that sometimes, usually we're probably going to both choose the same route because George and I were not that dissimilar. But occasionally George is going to want to go one way, and I'm going to want to go the other way. And I had to be very, very sensitive and aggressive with trying to predict what he would want, so that I could have the Phantom George to sort of butt up against. This was, as sort of a final comment on this was helped by the fact that his manuscript and notes came in different chunks. When I started the novel, I had a certain manuscript of his that I was working with. And then I worked with it for quite a while, and then we discovered another 100 pages of writing. So these were ways, and then I worked on it again, and then eventually his manager found this long letter that detailed where he was going with some of the plot threads. And the fact that these came later in the game acted as if George was out there, risen from the grave, sending me new stuff. So it made me have to battle this new information, just as if a live collaborator was out there sending me new stuff. So it would have been a lot easier had I had all this stuff up front from the beginning. But the fact that I didn't actually made it feel like I was working with a person who had their own ideas and directions for things, and I had to find routes into those ideas that made sense for me and that I could get excited about. So it ended up being closer to a normal collaboration than you might expect.
George Romero collaborating from beyond the grave. How
I know.
perfect is that?
If anyone could do it, it'd be him, right?